comes from the fascinating mind of Chris Ashton, and it's not his only creation.
This is amazing.
Thanks.
What a garage.
Yeah.
What a garage.
But Chris isn't, or rather wasn't, a mechanic or car designer by trade. His background is in creating computer games, but that might be at least part of the reason why these extraordinary cars look like nothing else.
When you're building a video game, you're trying to imagine a game that doesn't exist. And so I'm used to imagining things that don't exist and then figuring out how to build it and get there. And that's really what has happened with all of these cars.
This is a deep dive into the world of Ruffian, one of the most creative, exciting and inspiring places I've ever visited. I'm going to drive the Galaxie, but also have a proper chat to Chris about everything from a 1935 Plymouth with a V10 to something truly alien.
We had to build the table big enough to build the chassis on, so this is step one.
This episode is driven by Hagerty, who, in case you don't know, provide car insurance that's designed by drivers for drivers. So, if you have a special car that you don't drive every day, like one of these perhaps, then take a trip to hagerty.com/Henry. Or pick up the phone, give them a call and speak to a like-minded enthusiast about a quote.
You look at all the unfortunate people around you in ordinary, normal cars. I'm not sure a lot of them realise just what a car can be. That it can be something with this much emotion in it, tactility, that can put this big a smile on your face.
A big smile for a big car. At 17.5 feet long and 6.5 feet wide, this 1963 Ford Galaxie is a proper battleship. Hence the camouflage colour scheme, which took its inspiration from the USS Alabama. It's Measure 12 modified, if you're interested. However, this Galaxie has also got a very, very big engine.
Famously in period, the racing Galaxies had 427 big blocks. This has got Shelby's 526 cubic inch V8. Admitting that's 8.6 litres with 700 brake horsepower, about 650 pounds-feet of torque. It really shifts. What a noise this makes from those top exhausts! It's got dog rings on first to fourth, so 6 speeds, the dog rings first to fourth. Whoa.
The gorgeous dyed carbon gear shifter is indicative of the beautiful, thoughtfully crafted finish of the whole car. It was designed by Jake Palm, who actually started out creating knives, but has since begun working for Ruffian full-time.
The cool thing is that this is very much a race car, playing of being a road car, a street car. It's like a race car that everything's obviously exposed, but it's so beautifully finished. Obviously all the metalwork would be bare if it was a race car. In here it's all painted and it's still got those little touches from road cars in here, like the wood here, the wooden rim steering wheel is great. And there are so many details that you notice the more you drive this, things like the 2 dials here, so the red counter, yellow on black, and then black on yellow for the speedometer. And they, of course, match the seats that are in, the Recaros.
It really is a car of intriguing juxtapositions, like the tight, hip-hugging seat in the huge, airy cabin.
I love the detail on the throttle pedal down there. It's got an extra bar in it. And that's a nod back to when these went do dirt racing. And if the throttle got stuck, you could lift it up with your toe.
Despite it being a mammoth car with lots of race car inspiration, it's not actually as intimidating to drive as you might think. It requires thought and positivity, but not muscle. And with Penske dampers all round, it rides really well. It's low and there is the odd bobble in its softest road setting, but it easily takes the edge off the worst of the bumps.
The chassis is a GT Track Warrior chassis built by Ron Sutton. And the suspension is pretty trick back there, so it's 3-link suspension at the rear. So that's got an extra spring and damper in there. The idea is that forward motion, so if you brake heavily, it just helps damp that movement and keep traction on the rear. I love the fact that although it's such a large car, it feels so agile, so direct. The steering is super sharp. It's so well balanced because they move the engine 10 inches back and an inch to the right so that it's perfectly balanced for the driver, and they also put the drive sump over on that side and the battery as well. So its weight distribution is 50-50 front to rear and left to right. The other thing is that it's 325 tyres, so the contact patch is equal all the way round. And now, although this looks a bit like a caricature or something, it doesn't drive like one at all. You think it would just be fun to drive around in something that looks like this, but it drives brilliant. I want to take this to a track. It's wild seeing this amongst other traffic.
However, hopefully you've seen enough to be convinced that a Ruffian isn't just about the way it looks. This is no style over substance show pony. It's not a skin-deep charade. It is utterly shot through with both imagination and integrity. This Galaxie is also indicative of all the other builds that Chris has done, initially on his own in his garage, and latterly with employees and a huge custom-fitted workshop. Each creation has its own character and thought process behind it. So I think it's time we took a guided tour with the man himself.
This is amazing.
Thank you.
What a garage.
Yeah.
What a garage.
It used to be just my cars, and now it's becoming the Ruffian showroom with all the custom builds that we've done. So
it's so cool. We'll come back to this. I think we should do them in. Should we do them in order that you
we
did
can,
them?
yeah.
That would probably be. So this.
So this is the first one, yeah. So this is the first car. I grew up working on cars, modding them, making them faster. You know, when I was. First car was when I was 14. It was a muscle car, a 67 Cougar. And I had to work on it just to keep it running. And I had to learn how to weld because the floors were rusted out. So that got me started. And ever since then, it's been more and more and more. And I've just learned over my lifetime.
So you just learn by doing. And
yeah, exactly. And then once YouTube came along, like I had never made shaped sheet metal. So these fenders are the first sheet metal that I ever shaped. And I bought a planishing hammer and an English wheel just to do these fenders. And I almost gave up, and I came back after eating with renewed confidence, and I tried again. So yeah, this was the first car that I ever bought to build. And I had a vision in my mind of what I wanted it to be, and I bought it and stripped it down to a shell and started over, and it took 3 years. And so it's me in a 2-car garage, working on it in evenings and on the weekends.
And how long ago was that?
So this was 2016 is when I started.
So fairly recent, really, for kind
yeah.
Of, yeah, it's 10 years, and this feels like a lot. Kind of.
Right, yeah, so I went to, by the time this car was shaping up, I had a relationship with the wheel supplier, Signature Wheels, and he had a relationship with Toyo, and he hooked me up with Stan from Toyo, who got me into Toyo Tread Pass at SEMA. I never thought I would ever, I've been to SEMA, but I never thought I would take a car to SEMA, so that was super cool. And then this car, through SEMA, 6 months later, it had blown up all over Instagram and the internet and everything, and I was like, wow, people, I just built it for me.
Yeah.
You know, sort of blinders on, didn't care what anyone else thought. I built it for me, and then it blew up. And I was like, well, maybe there's something here. So
what was next? Was it the
GT40? Yeah, so I ordered this GT40 from Superformance. They come as a rolling chassis, no engine, no transmission.
Okay.
I ordered this while I was building that. And the idea was just I couldn't afford to pay somebody else to put in the engine and transaxle, and I thought it would be cool if I learned the car anyway, the ins and outs. So I got it as a rolling chassis, and then that car finished, and I had such a high off of building that and customizing it and stuff that it basically rolled straight into this. And I changed, one of the first things I did was the taillights, and those were so cool. The update that I did started on the headlights, and those took like a year, 3D printing and engineering and stuff. And then it turned into a wide body, and so this one was 2 years, but it's pretty much a SuperFormance under the skin, right-hand drive, the gurney bubble.
Notice that. Always notice that. When you're my height, you always notice. You always notice a gurney bubble.
Yeah, the GT40 is. Whenever I test drove one, I had this like, it's weird. You get teleported back in time, and you imagine what it was like driving at 200 miles an hour at Le Mans or something, you know.
And the exhaust, we've got to mention the exhaust, because that's, again, it's all your own work, and it is.
Yeah, so part of the first headers I ever made were for the 70 Mustang, and they're not, one header's longer than the other, and the tubes are all different lengths, and they're MIG welded, and they're kind of ugly, but they're still on there, and they work, and I've never changed it. But for this car, I learned how to TIG weld, and I tried to hire somebody to do 180-degree headers, so it sounded more flat plane than cross plane, and it was going to be $10,000, and I was like, I can't do that. So I'm going to have to learn how to do headers nice, because I know in a GT40, the engine bay, you're always going to show that off.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's going to see the exhaust, as opposed to the Mustang, they're kind of buried, but the headers here are on display. So this was the second set. And these are equal length, 180-degree headers, so that you'll see they're kind of wrapped around and noodled a little bit to spend length to get them the same. But now it really sounds like a flat plane. It's really indistinguishable.
So racy, doesn't it?
Yeah. At idle, it's maybe the rumpity rump of a sort of cross-plane
crank. But
as soon as you're into RPMs, it just screams. And of course, the Coyotes will rev to like $8,000. So you get that 180-degree header sound at 8,000 RPM, and it's just like a banshee, it just screams.
Such a cool engine, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So then same sort of thing. This thing I took to SEMA, went to the tread pass again, and then this blew up. And then that gave me the confidence, and I enjoyed it so much. I didn't know if it would just be a hobby, like a passing thing, and once I built a few cars, I would be done. But it just made me more hungry. So after this car, I started working towards opening a shop and hiring some people. Because I was doing the math. It took me 3 years to do that, 2 years to do this, and I looked at sort of the wish list, bucket list of cars I wanted to build, and I was like, I'll be 80 years old, and I won't be able to crawl under the cars or anything anymore, so I'm gonna have to hire people to do it faster. And that was actually the thing that prompted me to form the hot rod shop, was so that I could get help to build cars more quickly.
And then, was it the other Mustang next?
The Galaxie was next because I bought it as the next project, but by the time I was ready to start on it, I had the shop. So I had the front chassis clip and the rear clip and the donor car, and I had stripped it all out and then hired on people, and they started helping with sheet metal work and building floors and attaching it to chassis and all that kind of stuff.
And am I right? So this Galaxie wasn't your dream car, it was your father's, is that
My
right?
dad's, yeah. This was my dream car, if there was a dream car. 6970, I feel like was the most aggressive, like cool looking Mustang. So I built that for me. GT40 is a long time dream car that I kind of forgot about as a kid because I felt like they were too expensive. And then now that I'm old, I can afford stuff. And so I built the GT40. So then I felt like I got my two dream cars. So I asked my dad, because he's always been an inspiration to me and has always been a car guy, and I think that's where I got it from. And I was like, what would you build? And he said he would build a 64 Galaxie. And I didn't really know anything about him, because I was all into muscle cars. 64 Galaxie, like I didn't know anything about him. So I started to research on the internet, and I started seeing all these Goodwood videos.
I was going to say, 'cause you've got the
Yeah.
Goodwood sticker in the back of here.
Yeah. So I saw these Goodwood videos of these giant Galaxies racing on the racetrack against these little small European cars.
Yeah.
And like, it's laugh out loud fun to see them because it's so David and Goliath, and the small cars are good in the corners, and the
Yeah, it makes
Galaxy.
for brilliant racing, doesn't it?
It's
Sort of
awesome.
seeing-
Yeah. So I was like, oh, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a giant car that's built for big track racing. You know, it's going to be a race car, but it's going to be this huge 19-foot long Galaxie. So I called up, nobody makes a chassis that's a performance oriented for these things. You know, they're kind of like forgotten about aside from restorations and whatnot, some lowriders and stuff. So I called Ron Sutton, and he builds custom designs chassis for race cars, but they're doing some cool old Fairlanes and old Mustangs and even fiberglass bodied Mustangs and stuff. So I was like, would you do a Galaxie? And he was like, yeah, no problem. So I had to take a ton of measurements, and then he designed the full chassis. And at the time, I was super nervous about it because this car was like bolt-on suspension, and the GT40 was Superformance suspension. So I had never really built a chassis, but he gave me all the blueprints and everything, and then I had hired on other people as a team to help. So we built this thing on a big fab table, 16-foot long fab table.
Big fab table.
It looked like a trophy truck chassis. When it's just the cage and no body,
Yeah.
It looks like a trophy truck.
And
It's
because
just-
of the suspension as well, it's such a sort of wild suspension, you
Yeah.
would never conflate it with
right.
somehow, would you, I suppose?
Yeah, so this car was very extreme, and even with a team of 6 people, it took us a year and a half to build this car, partially because we were learning. The whole team was training up. I was the only one. Actually, there's one other guy that had built cars before, but everybody else was kind of bits and pieces, but by and large new to building an entire car. So there was a lot of training and learning from those guys, but also help.
I think it's the thing that sort of stands out to me in some ways is when a build's like this and it looks like it's hard to pick out what's not stock, if that makes sense. And that sounds an odd thing to say because obviously quite clearly it's not. But things like bumper,
Right.
you were saying, instead of, and the rear lights as well,
Yeah.
look like they kind of, is that just a stock one that's been really nicely refinished or something? But it's not, is it?
I tried, my background is art, so I went to school at college for art. I was into graphic design, and then I got into computer games, and in computer games I was doing art. So it's always that sort of art background. And I try to, when we're looking at these cars, I can see the other artists that designed them, you know, and I can imagine before sort of the bean counters get in there or the safety
Or the
team,
legislation gets in.
Yeah,
This is
like-
what they really wanted.
exactly.
To do.
Yeah, try to see that stuff, or the vision, or like the taillights on the Galaxie. They had this cool turbine, I guess like Jetson
Yeah.
look to them, which I really liked. But I also felt like it looked really 60s now. Yeah. So all I want to do is keep that vibe, but just make it a little bit more modern. So I designed my own taillights, 3D printed. I learned how to make silicone molds and cast lenses. And I mean, it's a huge endeavor. It's like at some point I had on the wall like 10 sets of taillights that were all bad ones, you know, various things like, oh, you didn't put enough mold release and they stuck to the mold, or this one, you poured it in a cold mold and the lens stuff bubbled, you know, and it's like, you learn those sometimes by doing and failing.
You enjoy the process.
I love it, yeah. And that's the thing that sort of kept me going, is just like, and actually every build is sort of
You learn something new.
trying something new and pushing it. You know, the after this we built the 67, or I guess really kind of in parallel to the Galaxie,
Yeah.
because we were going to go to SEMA and have our own booth. And so the thought was, I don't want to go to SEMA with one car and pay for a booth. That's a big expense. I would rather go with 2 cars, and I would also like to go with show a little bit of diversity. If we go with just the Galaxie, people might think that it's super, super wild, super crazy. I want to do something kind of classy to go with the race car, wild race car. So this was built as like a driver first, race car second, whereas the Galaxie was race car first, driver second, you know? So this car was not as much, the idea for this car was take what we've learned and try to build it efficiently and more quickly. But then we jumped onto the Plymouth and that was like, okay, we've learned all of this stuff, but we've also had to work with like outside partners and stuff to get parts that we want. For example, the carbon bits that are on this car. We worked with Anvil Auto and Matt, he's awesome, and that company was awesome working with us, and we still work with them. But for one-off stuff now, like the Plymouth, now we're doing carbon in-house. Yeah. So these fenders and stuff were all like us learning that process. And
yeah. A couple of things. So one, I think we should point out that these other cars here are yours, which shows I think you have very good taste in cars. The STO and the LP and the mono over there. The front of this.
Yeah.
Inch.
Yeah, so we kind of talk about it as the nose drop, and I don't know if anyone else says it that way, but yeah, 69 in Trans Am racing. Of course, the race teams always try to find any sort of edge case or ways to cheat. Anything to give them an edge. Bend the rules, yeah. So they would take a pie slice out of the front of the car, which would basically drop the nose down an inch. And they were just trying to get less frontal area so they would be faster. You know, any advantage, even if it's like a millisecond, is an advantage, you know. But when I was looking at the photographs of all the Trans Am cars, I'm like, why do they look so much more aggressive than the street car? And part of it, I get on the forums, I start talking to the guys who own these cars, and some of them are building replicas of these cars, and come to find out they're all cutting an inch or more out of the front and dropping it down. But then it's a cascading. You gotta do custom bumper mounts. You've got to remount the grille. You've got to move the radiator lower. Like there's all this cascade snowball effects of dropping an inch, just a little inch out of the nose. But it's one of those things that you look at these cars and you're like, that is the most aggressive Mustang I've ever seen, and you don't really know why. Yeah. But that's definitely one of the reasons why.
Can we have a look under the bonnet as well? Because I just with the velocity stats, because that's the other thing, isn't it, that you had to then...
Yeah, so this car was really inspired by the FIA Cobra Mustangs that raced in Europe, and they had small block 289s with Webers, and so that's what this is. It's an aluminum block Shelby 289 with Webers, but then because we had cut an inch out of the nose, it was a real aggressive hood angle. And the engines are naturally sort of tilted back a few degrees.
So they're all going at the wrong...
So we needed...
fighting.
Yeah, so we were either going to have velocity stacks that were right into the hood scoop, or velocity stacks that were really far away from the hood scoop and pulling in too much hot air. Yeah. So we chose to have these machined and stagger them so that they followed the curve of the fenders instead of being all equal length. And we made them out of Ultem, which is it's a plastic that it's really high temperature, chemical resistant. They use it on the space shuttle and stuff. It's a really high tech, very expensive plastic. Yeah. And the machine shop was like, we've never machined it. We don't know what's going to happen. And they did break a few and trying to learn how much they could shave at a time, you know. So it was expensive to do, but it was definitely one of the things we'd go to car shows or when we were at SEMA. It was like a focal point of the car, was like this cool kind of see-through Ultem stacks that are on there.
It's amazing because there's something very vintage about them.
Yeah, it almost looks like, it reminds me of root beer gummies. But yeah, some people were thinking that it was tarnished over the years from fuel or whatever. And we had these like cool, like that's a part of our booth where we photoshopped in the 67 Mustang racing and a track in Europe against Camaros. So people came to our booth and thought that this car had raced in the 60s. And they were like, what's the history? And I'm like, it's brand new. But this was a great car. This car was a California car, almost no rust in it. So all the sheet metal is original Ford sheet metal. There's no like aftermarket like hood or deck lid or, you know, panels on it. So that was like really, it's hard to find, you know, after so many years, 50 years of different owners and stuff, usually the cars are too beat up or too rusted out and you have to get replacement panels. So it's one of the cool things about this car is it's very, very Ford.
Yeah. Then we've got the Plymouth. So this is the most recent.
So it's kind of a good story of like me being new to running a hot rod shop. We got done with the Galaxie, we got done with the 67, and that's all we could think about. That's all we were planning. We got done, we were like, what are we gonna do next? And I was like, oh shit, like I don't really have a plan. And if you order a chassis now, you might get it in 10 months. If you order an engine now, you might get it in 6 months. I had that Viper V10 engine that I had bought to build a Cuda with, which
just casually drop in there that it's got a Viper V10.
Yeah.
So everyone's going, sorry, he said what?
Yeah, well, I had bought this engine to use in a Cuda because I thought it would be super cool. And with the chassis we have for the Cuda, it really wouldn't fit. So we had to shelve it. And then I had this crazy, it's a 9-liter stroker engine. It makes 800 horsepower on pump gas. It's super gnarly. And I had it sitting on the shelf for almost 2 years. And it was killing me, you know? And so then we needed a project really quick. So it's like, well, I got this engine and transmission. What car can fit a V10 easily, you know? And you start looking at things that have inline sixes because the engine bay is so long. And this had an inline six in it. And I was like, well, it's Plymouth. It's still kind of in the Dodge family. It all kind of works. So we went out and looked at it. This was a local car, measuring tapes, and we measured the engine. We're like, we think it'll fit. So we bought the car, we had the engine. We're like, what are we gonna do about a transmission? We had just finished the Galaxie, or what are we gonna do about a chassis? And we had just finished the Galaxie. And everyone was like, this is so cool, I wanna do another race car. I'm like, well, it will take too long to order another Ron Sutton chassis and to build that. I was like, what if we bought a race car and used that chassis as the starting point and modified it to make it fit in the Plymouth? And it just so happened that years prior to the shop, everything, I had bought a GT1 Corvette. It was a fiberglass bodied Corvette, full tube chassis GT1 car. It had an SB2 NASCAR engine in it, made 800 horsepower. Penske shocks, like big, gnarly NASCAR brakes on it. Like, I was like, wait a minute, like I already have a race car. What if we take that car and we cut it up and we build this car out of as many of the race car pieces as we can? One of the cool things about this car is it's original paint. So that's 90-year-old paint, what's left of it on the car. And we felt like it was cool to have that patina and that story, every like dent and scratch. And
it's a full on Mater car then, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, but it's all got a history.
Yeah.
And when we looked at the race car, all the components, the rear axle, the brakes, the hubs, everything also had scratches and nicks from competition. And it also had a story. And I was like, we need to preserve the race car stuff and as much of the Plymouth stuff. And then everything, all the glue that sticks it together that's a Ruffian can be brand new and shiny. Yeah. But everything else I want to preserve sort of the history of it. Yeah. So that's what it is. Full race car GT1 chassis, Viper engine, original Plymouth body, all steel, and then everything else in between is us. These huge carbon fenders, like a necessity. If we would have made these out of steel, they would have weighed, 50 pounds each or something. So I built this stuff out of steel rod, the way that I would start something like this, and then you cover that with sheet metal. But instead of covering it with sheet metal, we use foam and body filler, and then we've got a plug to make a mold to make carbon from. So the steel rod, you can shape it around the race tires. These front tires are 13.5 inches wide. Yeah, the rear tires are 15 inches wide. So, and they're the race wheels. We did refinish the wheels. These are the race wheels and tires on here. So they're massive. And so there's no way you're gonna modify the old original fenders to sort of fit other than cutting them up and welding in new metal, and we were trying to preserve the patina. So in a way, the carbon, the texture, visual texture of the carbon, I felt like worked really well with the patina.
The juxtaposition of the two is really nice, isn't
it's
it?
A really
the gloss over both somehow just, it feels like you're looking through that.
So it's been a fun a fun build, and we built it quicker than anything else we've ever built. But we also had troubles, like the race car had been wrecked before. It had all this experience, so like nothing was square, nothing was centered, you know, so it's not like when we built the Galaxie, everything was built on a fab table and everything was super precise. You know, this car isn't because it's used race car. Yeah. So, but that's all fun stuff, you know, to take something apart, figure out how it works, and then make something new with it is like super fun and exciting.
I love the sort of that juxtaposition. I suppose it's a bit like the paint and the carbon of having the modern race car stuff with still stuff like the wind out windscreen in here, and you look inside and the dials and stuff, and then it's all, having that on something with a race car is just a really nice mixture, isn't it? It's really fun.
It's fun, and we had problems to solve. You know, every build's a challenge, you know, and that's part of the fun is the hard stuff. And like on the Galaxie, one of the difficulties was figuring out where to put the exhaust because we had no room in the back. So we wound up exiting behind the rear window, which is like one of the coolest aspects of the car, but we didn't plan for that. It was solving a hard problem. And similarly on the Galaxie, or on the Plymouth, we have no room because of the grille for a full-size radiator. So we were like, we're gonna have to move the radiator to the back of the car. And then how do we make that look cool?
And it does look really cool.
So one of the rad things about the back of this car was where the license plate is, there were holes and mount for a spare tire. And the spare tire had a cover and it had a hubcap on there for the spare tire. So we were like, it's a cool round shape. What if we'll fill that bit with a license plate, and then we'll make a hole in the deck lid and we'll move the hubcap to the cooling fan.
It's like a rallycross car now, isn't it? With the radiator in the back.
So yeah, the radiator's back here. There's an electric water pump. It's more drift car inspired stuff, but it seems to work. I'm dialing it all in and figuring out, because it's a electric water pump inline, you can turn it on and turn it off, so you don't need a thermostat in the engine. So there's all this cool, new, neat tech in this car, even though it's a 1935 Plymouth on a used race car chassis. It's wild stuff.
It's very cool. When you did your first car, the first Mustang, you said you had a vision for what you wanted it to be. And it seems to me like all these cars, they're all so different, and yet there is this cohesiveness somehow. They all have the same sort of ethos in there somewhere. What was it? What can you describe what it is that makes a Ruffian, one of your cars, a Ruffian?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everything that we've built, there's some sort of racing heritage or pedigree or inspiration that we're pulling from. But I also really like, as an artist, I really like things that are put together well, that present well, that are polished, that look nice. You know, race cars can be very, very, very effective and not be pretty. But a lot of times, like, go fast stuff is cool, and for, you know, air shapes things in a cool way, you know, and so there's a lot of that stuff. So I think for us, there a lot of race car in these cars, but also presented in almost a show car quality, where there's
something quite futuristic about certain elements of them as well, isn't there, I think?
And I think, I feel like too, the video game background, a lot of people have mentioned that these cars feel like they were built in Forza or Gran Turismo or something, customized and built in a video game. And that is my background, you know. It's like when you're building a video game, you're trying to imagine a game that doesn't exist and what would be a really cool experience that no one else has built. And then you have to find a way to build it and make it work, or else your company won't succeed. And so I'm used to imagining things that don't exist and then figuring out how to build it and get there. And that's really what has happened with all of these cars.
After a look around the showroom, it was time to see the workshop and what's coming next. It's a mix of what Chris calls internals, i.e. more new personal projects to add to the garage, and customer work. Incidentally, if you came to Ruffian and wanted a Mustang or Galaxie for yourself, then you're looking at about $500,000, which frankly seems pretty reasonable given the enormous amount of work that clearly goes into each one.
So this is one of the internals. It's another Mustang, I know. But this one, you can see it doesn't have the big fender flares on it that the other two cars have. But those are 15-inch wide tires. So it's all kind of hidden under the body. So the theme of this Mustang is NASCAR. Basically, I looked at the garage, is it called Garage 59, the Camaro that ran at Le Mans.
Yeah, yeah, the experimental kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it opened the world's eyes to NASCAR. It definitely inspired me. Like, I just kind of put NASCAR aside and I wasn't too enthusiastic about it or whatever, but that car, like, so this is kind of a blend between old, so it was basically NASCAR themed. Could be old, could be new, doesn't matter, right? So this has IRS in it, like the next gen does. It will have side skirts, side pipes, like the next gen NASCARs do. But it's a Mustang, which doesn't make sense because they never ran Mustang in NASCAR, except that they did homologate the Boss 429 engine in 69, 70. Okay. So the Boss 429 Mustang, that was to homologate that motor for use in NASCAR.
Right.
I've always dreamt of having a Boss 429, but they're crazy. They're $1 million plus cars. Yeah. So this car is a Boss 429, but John Causey built, so ITBs on it, EFI, aluminum block. So it's lighter, it's faster. It made 845 horsepower on pump gas. It's gnarly. It's enough, isn't it? Yeah, it's 572 cubic inch, big block. And in this car, it's pushed back a foot. So to get it all behind the front suspension. So the seats and everything are this upper piece here. This is the dash starts after this, right? So this is to extend the dash back because the whole engine bay and everything's pushed back so far. The whole front end is all carbon. So the hood, the front splitter, the spoiler, front fenders, everything to try to get better weight balance on it. Take weight off the front because the engine's big and heavy. Take the weight off the front, put more weight in the rear. This is one of our own internal builds. So I bought this engine years ago when shortly after Chevy revealed this car at SEMA, or this engine at SEMA. And it's a 632, makes 1,000 horsepower with a warranty from Chevy, and it comes with the tune and everything. So it's very much bolt the engine in and plug it up, and it should run. The downside is if you look how tall this intake manifold is, right? And then throttle body's on top pointed up, so you still need to get an air filter mechanism on there. And I was like, it won't fit under the hood of any car without a giant hood scoop, which I didn't want to do. So we thought maybe a pickup truck, because you always see C10s with the LS swap and the intake manifold's way down here. So I thought,
you're gonna do like a shaker style intake over the top?
Yeah, kind of an F1 style roof scoop. So we thought we would not have traction if we put it in the front of something. So we decided to do mid-engine and put it in the back of an El Camino and basically build the car to showcase the engine and let it be out here in the open air and let everybody see it, and it should be pretty rowdy. So you can see we're building the cage here to connect the body to the chassis. We will kind of Coke bottle these fenders and run wider wheels and tires all the way around. The transmission tunnel used to have a transmission and exhaust in it, and now we've removed the transmission from up there, but we decided to still run the exhaust through the trans tunnel. So the exhaust actually comes out of here and is
that's super. It feels super weird.
Doesn't it? Yeah, so the exhaust is going to go forward, and then we're either going to come out of the hood or we're going to come out of the fenders with the exhaust there. It would have been sort of obvious to do like the boat style, like the lake boat racers, do the exhaust straight back, but we wanted room to run proper mufflers. And I didn't want to have like boat style exhaust back here. We're gonna have a huge diffuser back here, and I wanted to keep the focus on the engine and diffuser. So we ran the exhaust forward instead, which is pretty wild. We'll need some more weight up front anyway. We have the fuel cell up front, and radiator will be up there, fuel cell, brake booster, those normal things will be up front.
And then just when you start to think you must have seen everything, you find out that Ruffian is building a full-scale replica of the armoured personnel carrier from the film Aliens.
So this is basically the length of that vehicle, and this is the rear, and there's one wheel goes here, one wheel goes here, and then this is all belly. Here, well, there'll be computer screens and stuff, and chairs and weapons storage and stuff. And then here is a bulkhead. You'll step through the bulkhead and you can walk through the belly, and then driver's seat will be over here, and then turret is over here. So we had to build the table big enough to build the chassis on. So this is step one.
Ruffian, the name.
Yeah.
Where did it come from?
It's kind of that 70 Mustang that I built. I just had in my mind that all these, at the time, like, I was like, oh, everybody who has these cool cars has a nickname for their cool car. So I wanted a nickname for my 70 Mustang. And it was really built like a Trans Am inspired race Mustang. So I was like, Mustang's a horse. There's got to be a race horse from the 70s that has a really cool name. And at the time, there were already people that were on social media that were upset that I was cutting a car up, quote, and putting fender flares on it. And also, I put an LS in it. And people the Ford people just...
How to upset too.
They were so upset. So I started reading about racehorses in the 70s, and there's one named Ruffian. And it's one of the most famous racehorses because it never, ever lost a race. It won every single race, but it also had a freak injury early in its career, and they had to put it down. But so it's like super well known because it was a very young horse, very fast, never lost, and Ruffian being a word for like criminal or whatever. I felt like it was a good match, so we kind of have that attitude still, like the back of the Galaxie has the FU on it. We're not trying to be mean, we're just trying to say we're gonna build what we want, and we don't really care what other people think. We're excited about it, we love it, we have fun driving them, so it's just sort of the attitude to do what you want. So that's where the name, and it came for that car, but then that car became so well known unexpectedly that people started talking about Ruffian, and it became the name, the brand, and now it's applied to everything.
As you've probably realised by now, Chris is a fascinating person to talk to. He's also this incredible mixture. He's one of the most relaxed, chill people I've met that also has this amazing drive and real talent, genius almost, within him. And I think that's reflected in the cars, these sort of two levels to them. You see them, and initially you're struck by the creativity, the aesthetic of them, and you think, are they just a flight of fancy? And then you come here and realise all the engineering depth and thought that's underneath them. They're very much both form and function. And that makes Ruffian Cars one of the most inspiring places I've been for a very long time.